All right, guys, we are back. It's Monday. We've had half of a round unfold and plenty of talking points as always, as is comes with the soap opera that is rugby league. But to join me, I've got the fastest up and growing NRL journalist. He's rocketing to the top of the charts, Isaac Issa. Isaac, thanks for joining us once again on Larry Talks.
Of course, man. I had a really great time last time I was on here. So, and there's obviously so much to get stuck into. We're not even finished through round one yet. But yeah, I'm stoked to come on here, talk a bit of footy, give my thoughts on some stuff as well. I've got a few opinions as well as kind of little news tidbits. So, I'm keen to kind of get through it all.
Let's start with the results. Lots of people want to talk about the headline game, so we're going to build into that. Let's start with the North Queensland Cowboys and the Newcastle Knights. Newcastle getting the victory in the end. A scrappy game, is it fair to say?
Yeah, and it's funny you say headline game, but I probably preferred this one. Although
Absolutely.
it was scrappier. I felt it was it didn't drag on as much as the next game, and we'll kind of get to that. But no, it was definitely a spirited performance from the Knights. Yeah, it was one of those games that was probably set up to be the less kind of exposed and hyped up game. But I do think for what it was and the teams that were playing, it did deliver in some aspects.
I'd agree with that. I hate to say it because we can be so critical of the Bulldogs Dragons game, but I think we saw the best and worst of the NRL competition in the Newcastle Knights and the North Queensland Cowboys. I kind of tweeted out during the game that I think you can kind of see why neither side will likely play finals football. There was just there was a lack of cohesion, there was a lack of game management from both teams, and the game just kind of was hanging in the balance, waiting for someone to take control and decide that they wanted to win. The Cowboys, I'm really worried about. If there was a tipping market for first NRL coach sacked, which obviously you don't ever want to wish on anybody, but the pressure's going to build on Todd Payton fairly quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from what I've heard, it's already at 95% on that pressure gauge. It's genuinely concerning. And look, you look at kind of the way they played this game, and you look at their roster. They don't go hand in hand. They've got a good roster over there in Townsville, and to see kind of the lack of identity that this team is playing with, especially one that probably has a lot of really good attack in them and stars across the board. It's genuinely concerning, what Todd Payton is, relaying to them on a week-to-week basis, and this is only round one.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with you. On a positive, the centre who went to fullback. That's the one. Purdue went to fullback.
Yeah.
I thought he had a pretty solid game for the Cowboys. Tom Dearden looked a threat every time he had the ball, but you kind of felt sorry for him. They didn't have a lot of threat. On the Newcastle Knights, I think there's a few positives that they can build up on after that performance. Dylan Brown, no steps ill taken. I thought he had an okay performance, but the highlight would be Kalen Ponga. I thought he looked sharp. He looked back to his best. We want to see more of that from the Queensland representative. And before he went off injured, I thought Fletcher Sharp was looking quite good in the number 6.
Yeah, absolutely. It was look, I think that Dylan Brown played the role that the side needed him to play. Probably not to the price tag that's next to his name, but look, you can't. I think we see with a lot of teams, you can't have too many cooks, and I think that he respected that this is still Kalen Ponga's side, and stepped back when needed. Didn't feel the need to kind of push his hand in order to prove that he was worth that $13 million contract, which still sounds crazy to say, but yeah, no, I think Kalen Ponga came out and he did what Kalen Ponga does. It's never been a question of talent with Ponga; it's just availability. Now, if we can get him to string together, 18 to 20 games this year, I think that'll be a plus. And Fletcher Sharp, who's probably the future of this club, I'd like to think so. He looked really sharp in this game, and I think that he excels in whatever position he plays in. Unfortunate that he's going to miss the next 2 to 3 weeks, I believe, with a PCL injury. But look, he won't be out for too long, and the Knights play in 14 days, or 13 days now. So look, definitely positive signs from them there. And I think one thing that they had that the Cowboys lacked was, a sense of identity. They played with a style, a well-coached, structured style that kind of resulted in points and got, key players with the ball in their hands. So definitely one for Knights fans to feel good about. It's just a matter of kind of stringing them together now.
Yeah, good luck to Newcastle. A big fan of Marzu as well on the wing for Newcastle. He scored a brilliant try. It was really funny. I think it was the try to get Newcastle 10-6 ahead, or maybe it was 10-0. Sorry. He was meant to go outside his man, but instead he ran into his man and he said, you know what, screw it. I'm too strong. I'm too powerful. I'm going to get it over the line. So good on him. He did the Lebanese sidestep and he did really well there. Let's talk about the Bulldogs and the Dragons, shall we? Bulldogs 15, Dragons 14. Now, I'll caveat all of this with the Bulldogs got the 2 points. They won the game. So at the end of the day, history will not look back at a round one performance. The history books will say the Bulldogs won their first game against the Dragons. And a record that they kept every time the Bulldogs have versed the Dragons in round one, they have never lost. And so that record, well threatened at times, was clearly never in doubt. But what's your overall reaction to the Bulldogs' performance and even the Dragons?
Yeah, I think that we've seen quite a few overreactions to this performance from the Bulldogs. Now, one thing that I really, and I'd like to make a real strong point of it is, and I, I wrote this in an ESPN article that went out today. Head over to espn.com.au if you want to read the full piece. But essentially, winners win. And that's just a fact of life. Winners win. It doesn't matter how they win. It's that they won. And the reason I say that is because the Bulldogs probably played, a little bit worse than the Dragons did on Sunday. But what they have that the Dragons don't is a higher ceiling. And when, that moment comes where they need to step up, they are able to, like the good teams can. Now, when I say winners win, I don't mean it in an obnoxious way, but more so to say that, it's up to a good contending team to be able to iron out this slugfest, which is exactly what this game was. And they were able to grind it out and eventually come up with the win, off the back of, a superstar talent in Stephen Crichton. Now, my issue with the Dragons, or not so much an issue, it's just, it's part of every rebuild, but unfortunately they just don't have the ceiling that the Bulldogs do. They played probably their best game in, 6 to 12 months, definitely up there, but still didn't have the cavalry to ice out the game. It's due to the fact that they do have a losing culture right now, and they don't have the troops to kind of match it with a side like the Bulldogs, and definitely not a side like the Melbourne Storm, Penrith Panthers, Roosters. So look, while I believe the Bulldogs could have come out and played better, at the same time, I think fans need to be happy with the fact that, you've got a side that in those tough moments can still grind out a win, even when everything else isn't working for them.
I'm going to challenge some of that. Okay. I agree with you. I think winners win and they find a way to win. So I can't argue with that. The Bulldogs won the game. I think the frustrating point is I think the Bulldogs won the game because the Dragons didn't put themselves in a position to win either. So if we look at the final 5 minutes of the Bulldogs-Dragons game, Matt Burton with a brilliant piece of play. He grubbers in behind the defensive line, sees the space, passes to Lachlan Galvin. Galvin gets tackled. The left-hand side is wide open. The Dragons are short to their right, which is the Bulldogs' left. So everything was saying last tackle, short on one side, the ball can only go left. Bailey Hayward passes to the right. I can't remember who got the ball. It was it might have been Jacob Preston or Bronson Cherry. It was someone who wasn't Matt Burton, is my point.
Right.
We get tackled on the last tackle. The following set, so at this point, we now have 3.5 minutes left. The Bulldogs spread the ball to the wide areas. They go wide right, then they go wide left. Crichton throws a pass that I'd contend whether it was forward. Conversation for another day. So Jacob Kiraz, forward pass is called again on the last tackle. And time again, then I think there was one more set where we got caught on the last tackle in the final 5 minutes. Just not putting ourselves in a position to ice the game. I found that really frustrating. And I just was waiting for Lachlan Galvin or Matt Burton to just take a little bit more control and just seal the game. There was no need for us to go in a golden point.
Yeah, look, I think that I'd probably say that it was a subpar performance from the Bulldogs. I just look back on the difficulties that the Bulldogs had probably 3 to 4 years ago, spanning over an 8-year stretch of no finals, and the Bulldogs were unable to close out those moments or even get out of their own head when these tough situations arise. At the end of the day, the Dragons played better than the Bulldogs on Sunday. It's not debatable that the Dragons played better than the Bulldogs. I think what is reassuring for Bulldogs fans to kind of, know is the fact that a winning side will find a way to win. And we've seen it with a side like the Melbourne Storm, the Penrith Panthers over the years, where they are able to, find a way to win, stick to their systems, and most importantly, not get in their own head, and start panicking and throwing stupid balls and just trying to find any way to win and just trusting that their systems work. I think that's what we saw. We saw a sense of maturity in a side that has faith in the systems that Serraldo's put down. But I can't stress it enough. The Dragons played better than the Bulldogs on Sunday. But it is a reassuring thing, I think, for Bulldogs fans to know that, even when the pressure's on, your side is able to iron out a win and get the 2 points.
On a really serious topic, at what point do the Bulldogs build a golden statue of Stephen Crichton? Seriously, how good is he? He scores field goals. He sets up tries. The guy's a joke.
Yeah, I personally, and look, maybe this is my rugby league knowledge faltering. I didn't know that he shoots field goals. I especially didn't think he was our first option, to play to shoot a field goal on Sunday. But the ball went to Stephen Crichton, and Captain Clutch. He comes through and he secures the win for his side, and you can tell he just loves it. He loves putting this side on his back. And it almost feels like he flips a switch. We saw it when he came out of the scrum and just decided that he was going to go one-on-one with Holmes and then just flick the ball to Carraz. It's almost as if he just switches into that mentality and just goes with it. And it's interesting because I think we're going to start having a debate as to whether a center can be a top 3 player in the world. You've obviously got the likes of Reece Walsh, Payne Haas, Nathan Cleary, Jerome Hughes, but Stephen Crichton is slowly, etching his way into that conversation. And even if he doesn't get there, the fact that a center can even be brought up in these conversations is a really interesting one. And I think the Dogs need to get working on that statue.
That's a good point. Here's my rebuttal, and perhaps let me settle the argument for you and for anyone else who wants to have the argument. If we're going to talk about the best players in the world, I think we need to almost forget positions and just look at a player's ability to influence the result. That ultimately is the measure of who is the best or one of the best. Mm-hmm. And I think the limitation of Payne Haas is, as brilliant as a prop forward he is, and inarguably the best middle forward in the world. So no arguments there. A prop forward sets the platform, but it's up to the spine players essentially, or maybe a center, to win the moments, to almost leverage off the momentum set by said prop forward. Mm-hmm. So I think for that reason, you take Payne Haas out of the best in the world conversation. But when you talk about influence, Stephen Crichton wins games for the Bulldogs. Throwing the final pass for Jacob Kiraz's try, scoring field goals, kicking winning goals. Like he kicks goals, let's not forget that. And he's a brilliant goal kicker. The penalty goal he kicked when the Bulldogs took the penalty, I want to say to go to, perhaps it was a 14-all. I can't recall. To go to 8-all. No, it wasn't 8-all. It was the second penalty. That was actually a difficult kick. Weak side.
Yeah, I wasn't confident in that.
Me either, but that's the thing. You used the perfect word. Stephen Crichton is clutch. Maybe his name should be Stephen Clutch Crichton. If he was a boxer, boxers have a middle nickname in the middle. He'd be Stephen the Clutch Crichton because just the bigger the moment, he just takes it. Let's talk player transfers. Everyone loves a little bit of player movement. You've covered a few stories, the most recent being Zach Lomax. So you recently posted out today that the Lomax deal with going to the Melbourne Storm, but the negotiation with Parramatta is now quote unquote very close. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so look, and this story might essentially be out, and he could have signed by the time that this comes out. So I got a message this morning that it would be a shock if Zach Lomax isn't a Melbourne Storm by the end or by Monday night.
Wow.
Since then we've received word that the Parramatta Eels and Melbourne Storm are giving it one last shot to have that conversation about what we can do here. And now his manager has come out and spoken to the courts and essentially said that both sides are very close to securing a deal. So the Storm have tabled a compensation package, after the Eels blocked his move. And so, whatever kind of structures and policies they put into place for this compensation package, it could leverage Lomax on his way to Victoria to play for the Storm this year.
Wow, that is big news. That is huge news for the Melbourne Storm. And you know what? Regardless of what side you sit on this debate, I think a lot of people were married to Parramatta in their stance around making a contract mean something. And I very much respect that camp. But you do want the best players playing the game. And I think Zach Lomax playing rugby league is an overall victory. But I hope that this is a catalyst for the NRL to better look at transfers and to the policies and the governance around transfers. And I guess this is not something that we're going to solve today, Isaac, but with a club's ability to compensate another club for the loss of said player, that almost throws cold water over a salary cap. And this then throws a broader conversation to me around we need to have transfer windows and we need to have transfer caps. And I think that if the NRL can get to a situation where they're doing that, then clubs will be fairly compensated for players breaking contracts, and I think that will be more palatable for the fans losing the player. But something we won't solve today, but huge news: Melbourne Storm, Zach Lomax. That's a big signing, and something that will boost their backline undoubtedly. Let's talk about the Bears. They've been busy in the transfer market as of late, signing lots of players. Josh Curran, Talakai from the Sharks is now looks like he's going to go over. Mav Gaia has been tabled an offer from the Tigers. And then you broke a story around the Leeds Rhinos prop forward potentially on the Perth Bears radar. Can you talk to us about that one?
Yeah, so that news kind of came through last week, alongside actually the Talakai news. His name is Mikolaj Oledzki, Polish-born prop from the Leeds Rhinos. He's also an England international. He's a great player, great prop, and the type of player that you probably want at your franchise to start out. Only 27 years old. Now I've received word that the Perth Bears are extremely interested in his services. Now, he is contracted until 2028, but it looks like the Perth Bears may get their man through some kind of release from the Rhinos. Now, it's hasn't been revealed whether or it hasn't been publicly announced, by the Perth Bears that they are chasing him. He came out a few weeks ago to say that he has no interest in leaving the Rhinos. However, I've been led to believe that things have changed since then. And it's opening the door for the Leeds Rhinos to essentially get their marquee man in the middle, and to pair him alongside the likes of recent forward signings in Scotty Sorensen, Josh Curran, Talakai, who can play in the forwards as well. They're shaping up a really, really good pack over there in Perth.
Do you expect any marquee signings? Do we see any players? All right, I'm gonna reword my question to you. Do you see any players breaking their contract so the Perth Bears can get a marquee signing? And I use that terminology specifically, and I know it'd be a little bit speculative, but there's no marquee players off contract. I think 2020 is it 2027 or 2028? There's a plethora of high-profile players coming off contract. So I imagine they'll want to keep some cash in reserve for that, but they're still just missing a marquee player, the Perth Bears.
Look, at the moment, I've been led to believe that there is one marquee man who is under contract that they are keen on. Now, that's good. That's a story that's going to have to kind of wait to come out. But I believe that there is a player that they've got their eyes on, and they are actively looking at kind of approaching if this players club allows it. But there are a couple obviously off contract that, you know, a couple probably a tier below that marquee that they are still chasing at the moment. But yeah, there definitely is, you know, there is a player that they are keen on kind of getting who's you know, under contract at the moment, but it's kind of be a waiting game to see kind of where things lie. I don't believe that they've formally approached him, because obviously they can't. But there's definitely a marquee man on their radar.
All right, he said him, so you know it's a man. So at least there's that. So, guys, look into any male player under contract for 2027, and you might just find out. You don't have to react to what I'm going to say, but I'm going to wait for that news to confirm it's Matt Burton. But anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about referees, Isaac. Very sexy topic, referees. We can't go one half round of rugby league without speaking about them. Already we're seeing some inconsistencies. We saw Talagi, the touch judge, right there in Vegas, not VAR, not looking at a camera lens through Sydney. No, on the pitch, about a meter away, you seemingly saw him put his foot on the touchline, but he didn't. So we saw that. And then on top of that, we're seeing inconsistencies applying with the sin bin. Braden Burns gets sent to the sin bin. We've now seen him looking at least a 2-game suspension, charged by the match review committee. Stephen Crichton nearly takes off. I'm going to butcher the name, so I won't try. The Dragons winger. Setutu. Geez, that's so easy. How did I not even attempt that? So Setutu nearly has his head flying off. Stephen Crichton doesn't get charged. Now, what I want to say to all of that before I hand over to you is I have no issue with the Stephen Crichton tackle, because the player is falling, and so there's only so much Stephen Crichton can do. However, if we look at the application of the rule and the way the rule has been applied over the last 12 months, they've essentially set a precedent that if you hit the head, whether the player is falling or not, you're going to concede a penalty and you're going to the sin bin. No such thing for Stephen Crichton. Is this a problem for the NRL already?
Yeah, look, I've got 2 points to make on this. First point is I believe they made the right call on Stephen Crichton, but I believe they've been enforcing that rule incorrectly for a long time. Now, the issue isn't that Stephen Crichton, or it is that Stephen Crichton got off, but realistically, you know, in an ideal world, any player would get off for that. It wasn't Crichton's fault. He was falling and he was just going for the hit. In saying that, the NRL have made clear, as you said, that, you know, these are the rules that are in place. Whether, you know, NRL fans agree with it or not, you know, you do need to enforce those rules. Now, a point that I made it on the League of Inches podcast a couple of weeks ago, and a few of the boys disagreed with me, but I think that it needs to be acknowledged that star players get star calls, and I think that people like to shy away from it. At the end of the day, and Braden Burns is a great player and an even better human being. He's a great bloke, but he's not a superstar name like Stephen Crichton or even Nathan Cleary, you know, a couple of weeks ago in the trials. You know, these star players get star calls because they bring in star level ratings. And, you know, unfortunately, that is how the world works. You know, some people get, you know, more exclusive treatment than other people, depending on the output that they bring in. And is it fair? Of course not. But unfortunately, that is how things work. So I think that it should become less of an argument of this isn't fair because this player and this player, and start having more of an argument around essentially bringing back the rules a little bit in order to kind of facilitate these stars that you're wanting to put on the stage. So I don't think star players are ever going to stop getting star calls. I think the argument needs to be we pull back on these rules and probably put our resources elsewhere, you know, most notably in our shaky calls as is on things that don't involve injury, like a player going out or not. But yeah, essentially putting these policies in place just to enforce them on lesser known players is where the issue is. Not so much that Stephen Crichton got off, but more so that, you know, the rules are too strict not to apply them to everyone.
This is where the NRL needs to evolve as a competition, though, right? Because if you look at, so I'm going to use the biggest world competition. So let's look at the English Premier League. And this is something that, so the idea of a card system, I kind of like. So I think there is a lot of excuses and protection for NRL referees. They've got the protection with VAR or video referees, the bunker, whatever you want to call it. They've got the protection of the match review committee. I think that an NRL referee almost needs to be held accountable for the decisions that they're making live in game. So if you have a player who so point one here is the NRL need to come out and say what will constitute a suspension, what constitutes a penalty. If they want to call the Stephen Crichton high contact a penalty, I think that's fair enough, but that's where it stays. But they need to say this is what will be a high tackle and this is what will attract a suspension or a fine or a grade 1, grade 2, whatever it is, or not. The NRL need to come out and do that this week. Otherwise, this conversation and these types of conversations will continue into the season, and we don't need that happening. The other thing is, while ratings are important, integrity of a sport is more important. So the NRL really need to make sure that they get some sort of precedent setting going into the rest of 2026.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think that, at the end of the day, and you said it's just consistency more so than anything else. So the NRL needs to decide what's most important to them. Is it having your stars on the field? Is it enforcing super strict policies and just stick to it? I don't think people would be arguing with the Stephen Crichton call 20 years ago because the rules weren't that strict. So, it's a matter of either enforcing those rules on everyone or pulling back on the rules and allowing a little bit more lenience, and then you can have your star players on the field.
Roundup of the games this week. Just give me a winner's prediction, Isaac. So Storm versus Eels, I think we can confidently say part of the negotiation is Zach Lomax will not be playing in this game for either side. Who's your predicted winner for that one?
Now, the Melbourne Storm haven't lost a round one game in over 2 decades, I think. I don't have the stat in front of me, but it's been a very long time. This is the year
since 2005.
Yeah, so there you go. So 21 years. And so this is the year that streak ends. I think the Parramatta Eels get the win. I think that the Melbourne Storm lower on troops than they have been in a very long time. And I think that, the Parramatta Eels have, a fire under them. A hot take, of course. But I think that if the Storm are going to lose any round one game of any year, I think it'll be this year.
Oh, hot take. I'm sweating after hearing you say that. There you go. The Parramatta Eels are going to beat the Melbourne Storm. And if it doesn't happen, Isaac is a journalist on Instagram. Angle your abuse that way. Warriors and Roosters. Warriors at home for this one.
Yeah, give me the Roosters in this one. As much as I'm kind of hoping for the success of the Warriors this year, I'm just too, I'm too optimistic about the Roosters this year to shy past them in their first game of the year. So I'm going to go Roosters.
All right, we got a big blockbuster game on Friday night in the 8 p.m. slot. The Brisbane Broncos at home to the Penrith Panthers. Who do you have in this one?
Give me the Penrith Panthers. I think the Brisbane Broncos are obviously the most recent premiership winners, but they weren't overly impressive in the World Club Challenge. They've done a lot of traveling. Penrith Panthers, for the first time coming off not having played a grand final in nearly half a decade. Oh, no, in half a decade. So I think they're fresh. I think they're ready to go, and I've got the Penrith Panthers winning.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I don't like what I'm seeing coming out of Brisbane. Lots of drama for the standing premiers. Cronulla Sharks with the Gold Coast Titans at Shark Park.
Yeah, well, if anyone's at that game, feel free to come say hello. I will be at that game. I'm going to go with the Cronulla Sharks in this one. Josh Hanne's homecoming to the Shire, which is very exciting. But I think that the Cronulla Sharks, from what I've seen, they're looking fit. They're feeling motivated. I think that, they iron this one out fairly easily.
Oh, well, what I will say on the Titans is really good, impressive trial form, and they looked resilient. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think Sharks win definitely, but I think the Titans will give it a good battle. So, Battle of the Beaches, that one. Seagulls versus the Canberra Raiders. Jamal Fogarty plays his first game against his old side.
So if the Brisbane Broncos are the Brisbane Broncos and the Penrith Panthers are the game of the round, this is like right up there for me. I think this is a really underrated match. I think that this is going to be a close match. I was iffing and ahhing about it all day. I genuinely don't know who wins this game. Um, I'm I'm probably going to go with the Manly Sea Eagles, but only just. I don't know what this Canberra side looks like without Jamal Fogarty. And I think that the Manly Sea Eagles, they've got a lot more to play for, at least right now. Obviously, like they're just coming off the back of a really disappointing season, and now they want to prove that they can win, especially without Daly Cherry Evans. I've probably got the Manly Sea Eagles winning, but if you had the Raiders, I wouldn't push back too much.
Yeah, it's going to be a tight one. What I will say is Anthony Seibold, if he loses, him and Todd Payton can play a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who gets sacked first this season. And the last game of the round, the Dolphins against the South Sydney Rabbitohs, Suncorp Stadium.
Give me the Finns. I think the Finns are a top 8 side this year. I think they could potentially be a top 4 side this year if everything really clicks. Yeah, if everyone's fit and firing, I think I've got the Dolphins winning this one.
There you go. There is your NRL roundup. Isaac, any final comments, mate? Do you want to give yourself a little plug so that people know where to find the biggest and baddest rugby league news in town?
Oh, mate. So, well, look, I don't think I need much more of a intro to what I do than that. I think you sold it pretty quickly, so I'll just give you the details. You can find me at Isaac Issa _journalist on most social medias. Instagram's the main one, but you can find me on Facebook, on TikTok. You can find me on X as well, under Isaac Issa Rugby League or RL. And, LinkedIn if you want as well. A lot of my work is done via espn.com.au. So head over there to read my latest yarns as well. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it from me today.
Ladies, men and gentlemen, 7 things we learned out of the first half of round 1 coming to you later this week. So stay tuned for that one. Isaac, a pleasure as always. And we look forward to the next chat.
Perfect. Thank you, man. Have a good one.